Tonight we have a whole thing going on. Hi, this is my cat Tenko. It might have been a while since you guys have seen him. He's kind of a little bigger, a little sassier. I have another cat, Storm. Storm! She just like pulled up into the party. Hey, little one. She has her... she's so adorable. I'm gonna put her down though. So official business. We're here to talk about one very specific thing. And that, of course, is this week's chapter spoilers for My Hero Academia 336. And, you know, I'm extra happy to bring you these spoilers because I get to say I was right. Last week, or in my last video, or a couple days ago, I said I was half right. Maybe I'm half right about what's going on with the Traitor theory. But this week, these leaks, it seems like no. Somehow, 2 years ago, when I did the original Aoyama Traitor theory, I was like 1-to-1 like ratio correct. So I'm going to go over what happens in this chapter. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about how that relates to my original Aoyama theory video, which you can find on the channel. I think it's called the Aoyama Traitor Theory or the Quirk Exchange Theory or something like that, but it's not the one that I did so like very recently. It's one from about like 2 years ago. Okay, so My Hero Academia chapter 336. The chapter title is Villain. Again, shout out to Atsushi and everyone who was a part of getting these, this information out there. Let's start talking about it. So, chapter title is Villain. The chapter begins with Deku and Bakugo training. Bakugo says that cluster is based on the principle that he learned from Endeavor of concentrating and releasing. He produces multiple spears of sweat and explodes them simultaneously, and that's why he's wearing his winter costume, to increase sweat production. Now, if a lot of people didn't really notice, most people did, I think, but there's some people who didn't really catch that at the end of the war arc, Bakugo, after, he is... pretty much when he's trying to save Deku and all that stuff. And then again, after when he's thinking about how he felt when he was trying to save Deku, he realizes that there's a new way that he can use his explosions, right? That he can pretty much like compress them in a certain way that makes him way faster. And it's an entirely different kind of explosion, I think, than the kind that he usually does. So at the end of the war arc, he actually learns how to use his explosions in a different way. And it's implied that it's like way faster than anything that he's been capable of before. And it's pretty much, Hori trying to make sure that Bakugo on some level is keeping up with Deku speed-wise. And I know a lot of people have an issue with that to a certain extent because like Deku should be unreasonably faster than everyone else, and to a certain extent, the other characters keeping up with him kind of doesn't make any sense. But I think that there is a little bit of room for that, especially with like Bakugo, and especially just considering that, as the generations go on, other people's quirks are also getting more broken, you know what I mean? So there might be a few people that, of course, stand out, like Bakugo, who could be able to keep up with certain aspects of Deku's quirk, right? Like, who could be able to keep up with the speed, or could be able to keep up with maybe one aspect of the many, many different layered aspects of One for All. Also, just, I think that he's wearing his winter costume, actually, so we can get a cool parallel shot, maybe like 20 chapters or whatever down the line, or 30 chapters down the line in the final battle, or whenever that is. I think we're going to get a cool parallel shot of the second user, who has, we know he wears his coat like this or whatever, right? And then, now Bakugo with his winter outfit, he wears his coat like this. So I think we are going to get some kind of like interesting parallel. I don't believe in the theory that they're the same person. I think that's dumb, but maybe it's like a relative or something like that, and maybe we'll see like Bakugo leading the class to fight against All for One while Deku fights Shigaraki or something like that. I just think we're gonna see some sort of panel between Bakugo and the second user where they're both pretty much wearing their coats like this, right? And it's just obvious that it's supposed to be a parallel, right? Then moving on from there, we have Todoroki improving the control for the two halves of his body, pretty much. That's what he's trying to do with his training. And he does so by holding his hands like this and activating both sides. Now, it's kind of confusing, right? Because you could assume that what he's doing, it really could be a number of different things, right? He could be doing this so that if he activates the fire here, or like let's say like fire, ice, right? And you're always used to activating this on one side and this on the other side. But if you do this and activate this over here, you might be able to trick your body, you know what I mean? Because the fingers are on opposite sides than they usually are. You might be able to trick your body into making the element on the other side, like the side you're not able to. And if Shoto's able to do that, if he's able to literally trick his body into just letting him make fire on whatever side he wants to, or ice on whatever side he wants to, or on both sides, right? I think he'd be a lot more dangerous and a lot more versatile. Or it could be something like I theorized a really long time ago, where I thought that maybe Shoto would do like a high-powered kind of steam lance, right? Where, you know, if you have ice and if you have fire, the perfect fusion of that would probably be, a lot of people would say water, but I feel like that's a little less dangerous than having like superheated steam, right? Or some sort of steam kind of thing. And I know we have Deku with the smoke quirk that kind of gets rid of a little bit of the need to have a whole bunch of steam everywhere, but I don't know, maybe if he could do something with it. Yeah, I feel like you could superheat steam into like a laser beam or something like that. I've seen someone say that, like, if he heated the steam up in a certain way, but I don't know. We're going to spend too long talking about this when that's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about Aoyama, so let's move forward a little more to get to that point. So Kaminari is talking to Mineta, saying that the two enemy generals are weakened. Also, Gigantomachia is still sleeping and he's been in prison, so the chances for victory are greater than ever before. We see a metal structure being built, supposedly the place where they're holding back Machia. Now, Bakugo says that they're way too optimistic, and he has 3 points to prove how difficult it'll be. First, they're unlikely to find All for One. Until today, even when they found the Nomu Labs or Shigaraki's hideout, All for One was never there, which is true. I mean, they've never been able to corner him, pretty much. We know for a fact that the only two characters that have ever really been able to corner All for One have been Star and Stripe and All Might, right? And I guess, like, the only other possible, like, a little bit situation is, like, Deku and the Heroes during the PLF or the war or everything, when they managed to keep him from taking One for All, but that wasn't like really the All for One, right? Like, the All for One has never really been put in a situation outside of those two times of those two times of Star and Stripe and All Might, where he, you know, it was just like, whoa, none of my plans are gonna really work right now. So I definitely think I agree with Bakugo that there's no, like, they're not gonna go out and find him, right, and catch him off guard or anything like that, and he probably is thinking that they're gonna do that, or he's thinking that they're going to stay there. Like, no matter what they do, he ultimately probably has a plan for it. So they're saying that Bakugo's pretty much saying they're better off just, you know, working on their abilities and doing what they can, because sooner or later they are going to have to come up against All for One in a way that is probably going to be on his terms, right, and not theirs necessarily, which is absolutely true. And that's why it's important to try to figure out who the traitor is right now, because if All for One is going to attack on his terms, you want to get rid of, like, any variables, like a person who is on your side who's not really on your side, right, who is going to let him in and is going to help him take advantage of doing that kind of stuff. So I absolutely think that this is a really important time for this chapter. I've been saying for a really long time that ever since we got back to UA and we're doing the whole thing of, like, not seeing Aoyama's face, I was like, well, this is the perfect time to expose the traitor, right? Because everyone is in one place, and this is the time where there's the most tension for, like, you know, what a traitor could possibly do, or what they could possibly do by betraying everybody. So it's really good to see that, you know, that actually is the case. And after last chapter's red herring and that weird situation with Hagakure, who apparently is not the traitor, it seems like, as far as this chapter is making us aware. But yeah, it's awesome to finally have some sort of conclusion. I mean, not necessarily the conclusion, right? But to have some sort of just continuation of this plot line where we for sure know, oh yeah, it is this person for sure. And the build-up, I think, in this chapter feels really nice. So moving on, the second thing that Bakugo says is working against them is Shigaraki was already weakened in the last battle, and even then he managed to pretty much hold his own against everyone in the last fight, right? Like, even when his quirk was off, even despite all the odds and all the heroes and stuff that they had, Shigaraki was still able to put up a decent fight. So despite him being weakened already, like, or whatever is going on of him right now, thanks to Star and Stripes, Bakugo is saying, like, don't underestimate him, pretty much, right? Like, no matter what, this is still going to be a hard fight, even if he's a little nerfed right now. Like, we're still talking about an incredibly dangerous and powerful person. So even if he's nerfed a little bit, it just means he's going from here to, like, here, and we're, like, here right now or something, right? Like, it's, you know, it's not something that we should be comforted by entirely. And Bakugo also notes the fact that there is, like, less heroes around in general, right? So they have less help. So, I mean, him being nerfed might be kind of offset by that fact alone. And third, the villains must already have a plan and are waiting for the right moment. Even supposing that Search was destroyed in the fight against Star, they must have a plan B. The best thing to do now is prepare for the attack, which kind of loops back into what we said for the first point, where, yeah, obviously right now is definitely the time where you want to just focus on growing, you know what I mean? Growing, working on your plans, trying to make parallel plans, working on backup plans, and hoping for the best, because I don't think that there is going to be, like, a leg up that they can get on All for One. And here also Kaminari pretty much echoes the sentiment that All for One is pretty much going to be laughing at them no matter what they do. There's nothing they can really do, like, as far as trying to outplan him or outmaneuver him. They really just kind of have to settle down and get ready for whatever's coming and try to plan on like how to react. They can't really be super proactive right now. Or I guess being proactive right now means preparing to react, right? So from here, we get into the juicy stuff. All right, Hagakure steps into the forest. And if you remember last chapter, we ended off the chapter with All For One saying he has friends to spare. We saw Hagakure we don't even know. I don't think we really had any idea. Like, she just was kind of looking like she was against the wall or something. And most of us assumed that implied, or that meant that Hagakure was the U.A Traitor. And I feel like that's a very safe assumption to make, right? If the words friends to spare, you're talking about the traitor and all that stuff, Shigaraki looked, it just, the way that it was depicted kind of makes it seem like it was telling us that Tooru was the traitor. But apparently not. Apparently that is not the case, right? Apparently, I think what Hori was trying to depict is like, it was like a cliffhanger where we see Tooru and we're supposed to like assume she's looking in on the traitor or something. I just feel like it was handled a little weirdly, right? I feel like there was definitely a better way to handle that. I don't know. I feel like maybe in the volume release, that last page might get changed or something, because I feel like there definitely is a better way to depict that it's not Tooru necessarily, and do the whole bait and switch. Because I don't know, to me it feels like that wasn't necessarily the intention, right? Like, it wasn't entirely the intention. But if that was the intention, then okay, then I just don't like that. But it's whatever. I don't know. I feel like her seeing Aoyama in the middle of this chapter, right, and being like watching a conversation going on with him, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. But her watching a conversation go on with him is kind of like a weird place to pick up from last chapter after the whole, Deku and Bakugo and everyone training section. It's kind of a weird section to just like place to just pick up with her standing there behind a tree, where like, last chapter would have just been nice to see the tree or something, and maybe would have given us a little bit more context to try to figure out what was going on. But again, that might have just been the intention, for us to have no way to figure out what was going on, and for us to be fooled, and for it to just be like a red herring. Everyone thought it was Hagakure this week, and then next week I'm going to hit them with the actual identity of the traitor, and it's going to lead into it because Hagakure is going to be part of that reveal. And here we're going to talk about how. So Hagakure goes into the forest saying that a certain someone is quite depressed since the end of the war. She watches 3 people talking in the distance, and one of them says that the other has to obey because he is back giving orders. They say that the person just has to keep doing as he always did because the signs are disguised as everyday actions and are impossible to trace. Now, I'm not really sure what to take away from that last part about the signs being disguised as everyday actions. That might just be that all Aoyama has to do to share information with All For One is somehow make some sort of signs or do some sort of kind of regular everyday action that All For One can somehow surveil or look at. Or maybe there is someone that Aoyama is giving the information to that is like another spy or something like that. Or there's something where Aoyama is getting messages, right? Or Aoyama's parents or someone is giving him messages. But there's something about everyday actions that are disguised to actually be coded messages for All For One or something like that. And it's going to be interesting to see in the proper translation, of course, on Sunday, that's released by Viz, like what that's going to be all about, because it's currently unclear in the Atsushi summary that we have now. So Hagakure then thinks to herself that even after Midoriya came back, this person didn't smile once. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that there's been a person that I've been focusing on very specifically around ever since the time that they went to go after Deku, right? And of course, that's Aoyama. Aoyama is the only character who kind of suggests that they shouldn't go after Deku. He's like, well, isn't he fine if he's with an adult? Let's just leave him alone. And then after that, we do not see Aoyama's face or his eyes like we usually do, because he's always looking at the camera and looking at us. We don't see his face or his eyes until now, like until this point in the story, right? Like, he wasn't in the bath chapter. He's just kind of been tucked away in the background. And even in color pages, he's not showing his face or his eyes in a way that kind of makes me feel like he's guilty, right? Like, he feels very guilty for what he's done, and he's done looking at us. And that was another thing that really reinforced me to make that Aoyama theory video in the first place, the recent one that I made, because Aoyama not looking at us at this point in the story when everyone is together at UA, right? That was really suspicious. It made me feel like, okay, we're ramping up now to this reveal. So because Aoyama didn't smile once, right, since Deku was brought back, Hagakure, being a member of the class, pretty much a friend like everyone else in the classes apparently, was worried about Aoyama. And that tells us that's kind of narrator or self-thinking dialogue, whatever it is, tells us that Hagakure is probably not the second traitor, or not in any way a traitor, right? That like whatever inconsistencies there are regarding where she was in USJ or anything like that, or whatever kind of coincidence regarding her and the mall and Shigaraki, that genuinely might just be a coincidence, and that genuinely might just be something that is like throwing us off the trail of Aoyama, right? It seems very much like it was possibly that Horikoshi had these two characters and he wanted you to think that either one of them or both of them, or just something was going on, that some of like one of these two was a traitor, even for the smarter people who were like looking at all the clues and everything. Hagakure definitely is a good other option if you're looking at all the clues and trying to add stuff up. And it seems like Horikoshi was definitely very aware that there was a lot of suspicion on those two characters, because he really kept putting them together, so that now when we get to this point, it's kind of a relief that she's not like the traitor or anything, but you still kind of have to wonder a little bit, right? Like you still kind of have to wonder just a tiny little bit, but again, because she's having her thoughts about, you know, worrying about him and that being her intentions, that makes me a little more just prone to believing that is actually her intention. Like she is worried about Aoyama, and it's not because she's doing any sort of side traitor thing. I know some people think that maybe they could both be traitors for like different people or not know or something like that. I don't think that's the case. I genuinely think that she is just seems suspicious, Tooru, by pure coincidence, and that's the case. And it's not literally pure coincidence. I know people really don't like pure coincidence in stories, but it's not literally pure coincidence, because Hori is writing it intentionally with the intention of, you know, masking what Aoyama is doing up until the point where this reveal happens, and you have to question whether or not it's like who it is, if it's Tooru or if it's Aoyama. And now we know for a fact that it's Aoyama, but I don't know. I'm conflicted on how last chapter was handled, the end of last chapter, but at the same time, I like how in general Hagakure has kind of been like a smokescreen for Aoyama in a way, right? Where like even if you were following all the breadcrumbs accurately, it still wasn't like 100%, you know, like you still didn't really know. So Hagakure goes after Aoyama to try to, you know, figure out what's going on with him, and that's when she figures out that he is the traitor. Because, of course, like we just mentioned, his parents are telling him he has to obey All For One, and he has to do all this stuff for All For One, and that they're worried because apparently if he doesn't listen, they're all going to be killed. Aoyama's mom then says that she has already obeyed All For One's request as soon as the school year started, which means she did something right at the beginning of the school year, and then informed him of the location of the training camp without anyone finding out. It's going to be interesting to see how she found out the location of the training camp, because I thought that was supposed to be a secret, right? Now, from this point, Aoyama cries, and he tries to tell his parents, like, no, you know, I kind of don't want to do this anymore, you know, and because a large part of the Aoyama Traitor theory was that he's being forced to do this, right? Like he doesn't necessarily want to do these things, but it's breaking him slowly and slowly and slowly. It's breaking him. Him comparing himself to Deku and then him having to do this, right, is like just giving him a crisis of character that is ultimately like tearing him apart and going to cause him probably to do some really bad things. So as he's trying to say no to his parents and oppose them, his parents quickly say that they are not doing it because they like it either, but it's too late to go against him. Hagakure is listening to everything and can't believe it. She thinks back to the villain's attacks on USJ and the forest, and, you know, I think she's kind of starting to piece it together and, like, wonder how he could have done this, right? But at the same time, she probably has to feel for him a little bit, because she's seeing at least that, like, the whole family is in danger. It's not just kind of like the situation where he's a bad guy and he betrayed us and, you know, it's just cut and dry. Like, no, he's being forced to do this. And even though that is the case, it's kind of hard to completely sympathize in the moment, but I could tell that, you know, this is the kind of series where that is going to be a little bit of a point of contention, that like he is doing this against his will. Aoyama's mother then says that she only wanted their son to be happy, and we see a small flashback. She asks, "Do you want to be like everyone else, Yuga?" And he replies, "Yes, because being the only one different is scary." Now, according to the leaks, Aoyama was born without a quirk, so bam, got that one. And apparently his parents asked All For One to grant him one so he could chase his dreams. And again, that's another thing we got from the original Aoyama Quirk Exchange Theory. And I like how that mirrors Deku, obviously, right? Who Deku couldn't change his dreams. Deku was just like, you know, he was different because he didn't have a quirk. And, you know, obviously he faced some hardships because of that. and he ended up getting his quirk from someone who allowed him to chase his dreams, right? But that person was All Might, whereas Aoyama's was All for One. And we know that any bargain you strike of All for One, or anything that he does for you, that's not going to end, in a good place. So it's definitely really interesting to see pretty much the two people that it started off in the same place, right? Like Aoyama and Deku were both quirkless, and it's interesting to see how, right off the bat, just like at the point that they were given their quirks, they go off to the side, right? Like they go off in very different directions despite being right next to each other kind of the whole time, because they don't sit far from each other. They're always in school together. But yeah, I really like this development for Aoyama. I feel like it does a lot for his character. I've been screaming about it for so long, trying to tell people that this is what was going to be happening, right? But nope, some people didn't want to believe me. Some people wanted to call me crazy and cast stones. Now who's crazy? I'm still crazy. So at that moment, we pretty much cut back after seeing like a flashback of All for One giving Aoyama the quirk, and Hagakure realizes that she needs to warn a teacher, but sees somebody approaching. Aoyama still cries, saying that he suffered all this time. He dedicated himself to this role so as to not arouse suspicion and to not be consumed by guilt. When All for One was arrested in Kamino, he thought he could finally live peacefully with his friends, but he was wrong. His parents apologized, and Aoyama says that he did all of this to protect them because he didn't want them to be killed. They then ask him to continue protecting them, but it's at this moment where Deku arrives, and it seems like he was brought by Hagakure, and Deku pulls up on Aoyama and sees, his parents and Aoyama, who has like a reaction of dread. Like Aoyama's already going through the pain of like barely holding this together and everything that he's done and all the guilt and everything, and he's like holding his face. And once he sees Deku there and Deku like says a couple things to him, he like pulls his face down and his eyes get really white and sunken, and you can tell like Deku was the last person Aoyama wanted finding out about being the traitor, right? Because he compares himself to Deku so much. He sees himself as like a parallel to Deku in a lot of ways. So Deku is pretty much the one person you wouldn't want to find out. Like Deku is, I think, the main person that Aoyama was worried about finding out, because I feel like Deku being disappointed in him and Deku going against him hurts just a little more than anyone else, because again, he sees them as being so similar when really they're not, outside of the situation that they were placed in at birth, because they were quirkless. So when Deku arrives, he starts questioning, like he heard from Hagakure something about the traitor. So she did give him a little information, fill him in a little bit about what was going on, and Deku asks if it's true. And of course, the parents, Aoyama's parents, are like, no, trying to play it coy, trying to play, whatever. Nope, Aoyama's crying is kind of a dead giveaway, right? Like, so Aoyama cries nonstop while looking at Midoriya. He blames himself for being the only one who didn't say anything to him during the rescue, which is another thing that we noticed, by the way, that Aoyama was the only person that didn't say anything to Deku or even try and have any sort of speaking line when they all went to go save Deku. We did notice that, if you caught that on our Twitter, at Vocal Pineapples. And then we see a panel showing his reaction to the letter Deku left when he left UA. Midoriya said that he had gone to the forest to look for him because he realized that something was wrong. Aoyama was the only person who remained sad all this time, which again, it shows us that these people consider Aoyama a friend, right? Like, Deku, just like Tooru, noticed that there's something wrong with Aoyama. There's something up, like he's not acting like he usually acts. He hasn't smiled in a long time, and it's really tragic because that just shows that they obviously care about their friend, and obviously they're paying a lot of attention to their friend. I mean, sometimes it's hard for me to tell when friends are having a hard time, right? And here they are, but it led to them finding out something that I'm sure this is a major shock to Deku, and I can't wait for like everyone else to kind of run into the forest and try to figure out what's going on, and also figure out like what's gonna happen now, right? Like, is there about to be a fight here? Is there about to be a long conversation? Aoyama's parents are there. Are teachers going to get involved? Like, what is going to happen in the next chapter? Because this chapter ends off with, Aoyama blaming himself. Aoyama pretty much giving like a sob story and everything. And then admitting that he's the one who leaked the location of the camp and USJ and everything. And calling himself a disgusting villain. And pretty much admitting to Deku that he is a disgusting villain. And at the end of the chapter, obviously, we end on a flashback to the cheese that he left Deku way back. Yeah, I'm sure you remember that. But he left the cheese saying, "I know everything." And that's where we end the chapter off, with Aoyama confirming that he is the traitor. And those are the spoilers and the very messy, just all over the place summary for this week's chapter 336 of My Hero Academia. It is very late, and that I've just had a roller coaster of a day, just trying to see if those leaks were real and what's going on, and like, you know, just seeing how close expectations and theories to reality was. And I'm very tired. I'm very tired, honestly. I'm gonna go to bed, but in the morning, expect some sort of video talking about this whole Aoyama situation. Like, I definitely have more to talk about with this. I just feel like, you know, you guys, most of you probably came just specifically for the chapter spoilers and not like a Aoyama theory kind of victory lap, right? So I guess we'll do a little bit of that tomorrow. And yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you, Atsushi. Thank you, Diablo. Thank you, you know, everyone who made, you know, this all come together. And thank you, of course, to Horikoshi for, you know, laying all the clues and everything for us to figure out. Because, you know, we did somehow figure out, like, 1-to-1 exactly what was going on of the all-for-one Aoyama situation. So that means that Hori laid it out correctly, right? Like, he properly laid out the hints, and he properly did that. So, of course, Hori gets all the credit for this, like, awesome thing. Like, I have a lot of people going, you know, Pineapple, how did you figure this out? And I get, like, a lot of, you know, love on Twitter and stuff, but I definitely think Horikoshi deserves that love on Sunday, right? He deserves that love on Sunday when this chapter comes out, because this was just really well done, honestly, in my opinion. The way that everything was laid out, the way that if you paid attention, you could figure it out, you know what I mean? That's, I feel like, exactly what you want from mysteries in a lot of series, especially this one, where that's kind of the way that it's handled, and it's not supposed to be something that it's like a big brain blast that you couldn't have figured out, and there's no way you could have figured it out. I feel like it's way more better, or just way better, when you can figure it out, right? You could piece it together, but it's going to be difficult, and there's a lot of things, like obstacles that make you wonder, right? Like, am I wrong? Am I right? And again, I just really appreciate that 2 years have gone by. I've been championing this theory for 2 years, and now finally we see it officially confirmed. So thanks everybody for all the support. Thanks Horikoshi for the My Hero Academia manga and for always being a great mangaka and a great writer. And yeah, let's do it. Let's I'll be back here tomorrow. We're gonna talk more about this Aoyama reveal and kind of, I guess, clear up a little bit. I feel like once the chapter translations are out, everything clear up a little bit, like what's going on of Hagakure and what's going on of everybody and just all that stuff. But for now, I'm going to call it a night. Those have been the chapter spoilers for My Hero Academia chapter 336. I'll see you later. It's Pineapple. Peace.